1, 2.
You're watching GCTV, Community Access Cable Channel 15 in Greenfield, Massachusetts.
All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.
Welcome to the Ways and Means meeting of April 25th. I'm Otis Wheeler. I'm the chairperson. I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:02. And I'm going to take this meeting is being recorded, videotaped, and broadcast. If any other persons present are doing the same, please notify me at this time. Just GCTV. I'm going to take the roll. Councilor Wheeler is present. Councilor Mayo? Here. Councilor Math is absent. Councilor Dolan? Here. Present. Councilor Alice?
Present.
All right. We have no approval of minutes, no public hearing, no motions. I'm gonna invite the schools up in a moment. I will allow some questions from the audience later on. I'd really love it if we could keep it more to the question side rather than comments, because we have a lot to go over and we're really in the middle of the process here. But I do know that a lot of you want to contribute to the process. So that said, I'm going to invite Superintendent Martin and the tech school representatives up first.
Any rules on these things?
Press the button and it'll turn green, and that means it's on.
Good evening. I'm Rick Martin, the Superintendent of Franklin County Technical School, with my business manager, Russ Cobras. And we're here to provide an overview of what we've been up to in the last year, and then how it would impact our budget moving forward, and how it may benefit the community of Greenfield. In the last year, our school was named to the district honor roll for AP. We were the only vocational school in the state named to this, and we were one of 18 school districts in the state honored for our improvement with our advanced placement courses. We finished up a new house that we built in collaboration with the foundation, and this house sold for $238,000, and with the profits from that, the foundation then bought another lot, and we are now building that house, and we'll continue to do that as we continue on. And I got the collection of the data from the landscaping, electrical, plumbing, and the carpentry shop. Out of that group of kids there, 16 are from Greenfield. We recently received a $500,000 grant for a new renovation of our welding, which included a robotic arm, a CNC bender, a CNC cutter, a new ventilation system and tools. We recently had an open house, and it was well attended, and I appreciate all those who came. Recently, we finished up our installation of our sports lights. We saved approximately $150,000 because our students dug all the trenches, laid all the wire, put all the stuff in there. So we saved, it allowed us to be able to accomplish this because of the labor provided by our students. In the fall, in 2019, we are beginning a new animal veterinary science program. And we are just going to be doing this with 9th graders. We have recently hired a new veterinarian. We are going to be working in collaboration with the animal shelters to try to help with our diagnosis of animals and to try to help them through the curriculum. So it'll be 9th graders for the fall of 2019. Then in 2020, we begin to add a grade. It'll be 9th and 10th, and then 10th, 9th and 11. And then after 4 years, we'll have a full and complete program. And we're excited about this opportunity because it seems like it was well needed in the area through all of our data research. And the students will leave here having the ability with an AVA certification, which is approved veterinarian assistant, which enables them to go on and get their veterinarian technician license at a 2-year college or university and continue on into pre-vet if they so choose to do so. And we will also have a dog grooming component to this as well. Cooperative education placements. We currently have 86 students in junior and senior year out on cooperative education. That's a significant percentage of our seniors, over 56%. They are in our communities now and getting paid for what they do every other week. Enrollment trends. October 1 count was 463, so we're back to where we were 3 years ago when we were 463, and you can see the trend from the in-district enrollment from 2013 through 2018. Students applying to Greenfield for this current year, we currently have 29 applications, and you can see where they have come from. The majority have come from the Greenfield Middle School Academy. Others have come from various other spots. And that generally fits our trend from previous years as well. But I believe last year at this time we had 33 students apply. And that number generally goes up between now and the time we start in September. So we'll have to see how that develops because we're still in the admissions process. Greenfield students at Franklin County Tech. For this current year, we have 96 total. We are going to be graduating 26, and you saw from the previous screen, we have 29 applicants, and so we're going to project, and I will get that to in another screen, that will have about the same amount of total students before it's all said and done. But here's where our current students have come from before coming to Franklin County Tech. The Greenfield enrollment, as you can see, has declined since October of 2013. I think it's one of two in our 19-member towns that have declined since October in 2013, down from 123 to about 96. In October 1, we are projecting about the same number for next year, given the high amount of graduates and the projection of the students coming in. So that only helps the Ways and Means be able to plan and budget for an expected number. Special education students in grades 9 and 10, we're about 39%, and you can see where everybody else is. So that enables us to be able to hire some more special education staff to support the needs of the students. Previously, that number was about 28%, but recently we have a significant increase in our special education population, and we have to accommodate for that by law. So we have to make sure that our student-teacher ratios are in alignment with the special education process. Yeah.
And I will take over from here. Before I jump into this, I just want to say thank you for inviting us over to this building, because John Zahn, who this building's named after, was a 25-plus year member of our school committee. So it's not, and I've never been in the building, so it's nice. We dedicated a tree to him, you guys gave him a building, so it's very nice that you stepped way up on us. This is a little trend of our budget over the last few years. Top half of the screen is the revenue sources for our budget. Bottom half are the appropriations or uses. And if I did it properly, the top half equals the bottom half over in the yellow shaded area. So you can see we have a majority chunk of our sources of funding, or our revenue sources, is from our town assessments. We have 19 member towns. The assessments on average across our 19 towns went up 2.8% this year. Rick and I did a 10 and 20-year trend of what we've done in the past, and it's been about 2.83%, so we're right in our 20-year average window of where our assessments have been if you smooth them out over time. Chapter 78, we were blessed, as was Greenfield, with getting a little extra Chapter 78 due to the rejiggering of the state foundation formula, so we've plugged that number in. Most years, Superintendent Martin and myself are very conservative on our Chapter 70 numbers and our transportation reimbursement numbers. Usually in any years where the governor has to do 9C cuts as a school district, he'll whack us in the transportation area. So we usually try to be very conservative in those two spots. But with the new Chapter 70 formula, we figured his budget's probably the base, and the legislature may go up a little bit from there, of which they have when I saw the House Ways and Means budget come out. So we're doing a little bit better. So that kind of shows you where we are. Our major increases in our appropriations on the bottom side, we signed a new 5-year contract for transportation, so the bus company, we had a pretty good deal, I guess, in the last contract. That went up significantly, but if you look at contracts settled statewide, it was a reasonable contract. So for us, it was a 8% or so jump, I think, in our budget there. So that's a big piece for us. The insurances, we have budgeted for 6 to 8% increases in our insurances. We are in the Hampshire County Self-Insurance Group. That group has redone its benefit plan, so they're making some changes in co-pays. So we expect the premiums to be a 0% increase as far as they're concerned, with an increase in co-pays. However, we have to impact bargain with our Teachers Association the co-pay changes, so Rick and I put a bump into the insurance, and I think it's conservative, and we should have enough money to cover whatever the impact bargaining. We are currently in bargaining with our Teachers Association for next year, so I'll just leave it at that we've got some money in there to take care of that piece. Also, our retirement contributions, we are part of the Greenfield retirement system, because the Voc school spun out of Greenfield and out to Turners Falls back in the 70s and became its own district. So we are in the Greenfield retirement system, and we're on a trend of people retiring. So you'll see our retirement contributions are trending up, and that is basically a numbers game of people retiring. So I think to hit the major points on that screen.
Just one more point regarding the Chapter 70 increase. As you can tell in our E&D, the last couple of years, we were 250 and 220. So with that increase in the Chapter 70, we like to be very conservative in our budget and allow that money to flow into E&D for the following year, so that we don't go back to our cities and towns and increase the assessment. So we're trying to be conservative, and we would hope that that money would flow into our E&D for next year, that can offset next year's budget.
So assessment-wise, how does Greenfield size up with our 18 other towns? Greenfield is one of our lower towns as far as a per-pupil assessment. Greenfield's average per pupil assessment comes out at 11,788, and if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you know, it's 13,320 is the average across all our towns. The 96 in enrollment, like Rick had shown you on a previous screen, the trend is down, but it seems to have bottomed out and steady. If I look back at a 10-year trend for Greenfield, your average was around 114 students, but we know countywide we're losing student populations, all schools are, so we've adjusted ourselves to the new reality that number of 463 in-district enrollment may be there, or we're hoping to grow it up toward 500, but it's not going to be the way it was back in the 70s and early 80s, that's for sure. Also, as part of our budget this year, as was last year was the first year, we do have a capital assessment. The 19 towns voted a bond authorization for us, so we did improvements on our roofs, parking lots, windows and doors, ball fields. So Greenfield's portion of that capital assessment is $56,633. The way the debt service schedule runs, that's probably going to be, this will probably be our highest year as far as a capital assessment, and then it kind of trickles down. It's not like our mortgages where it's the same amount every year for 20 years, but this is probably one of the more expensive years as far as our capital assessments are concerned. So we've asked all our towns to put that on their annual budgets, as well as our operating assessment. And this just gives you a little feel for our enrollment trend, where our per pupil assessments have been in the last few years. As you can see, we did some right sizing of our schools. So 16 was a little high on our per pupil assessment, and it's come down a little bit in the last couple of years. Minimum contribution, that's Greenfield's portion of our minimum contribution. So that just gives you a flavor of where we've gone assessment-wise. And then I just wanted to show you that I know how to make pie charts. So the blue, the bigger part of the Pac-Man is town assessments. It's just a visual that shows you how much local taxpayers bear the burden more than the state on our schools. I'm sure Greenfield has a similarly looking Pac-Man, and our other districts certainly do too. So it just shows you that the towns are the blues and the reds are the state pieces of the revenue sources. And another pretty picture, and this is basically showing you that we are a labor-intensive industry. So the biggest piece of that pie has to do with our instructional services, which is mostly salaries and benefits. So when you do resize, as painful as it sounds, it usually affects personnel. But we've been lucky that we've been able, through attrition and retirement through the years, stayed out of the newspaper and any drama. We've been able to right size based on those things happening without much fanfare. There's a pretty picture of your farmer's market.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Do we have questions from counselors? Also, this should go down. Counselor Dolan?
Just out of curiosity, you talked about the new veterinary shop. You also mentioned in the correspondence that we got that a couple of shops have closed. Would you mind filling us in on what those were and what the reasons were?
Sure. There was only one shop that closed.
Okay.
It was our business technology program, and we spent about 4 years assessing the enrollment in that program. And when our last few years enrollment was down to 1 and 2 students of an interest, it really wasn't something that students could benefit from. Plus, a business technology shop program can be and should be and is duplicated at any other school. It's not a specialized type of program. So we wanted to get away from the common type of program and then try to eventually grow another one, which is what we're doing now.
Very good. Other questions? Counselor Alice?
Are those packets of what you just showed us by chance? Is that the,
It isn't entirely the PowerPoint, but I'm going to leave these here with you. It is our budget book. It'll have our line item budget in it with any variances. And then some of the front pages is a little bit of the PowerPoint.
Thank you. Other questions? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. It's pretty straightforward. I think you guys are doing really good things over there. I like the house building program. I'm excited for the animal sciences to be added, and thanks for all you do.
Thank you very much.
So there's some changeover that we have to do with the PowerPoint. So we're actually going to skip around a little bit, and I'm going to call the treasurer collector to the floor at this time.
Hello? Okay, just making sure this on. Hi.
So, we're going to be talking about the treasurer collector and the debt services. Treasurer collector is on page 63 of the budget book for those of you following at home. All right.
No, I don't
like
have an
to-
exciting
I was
presentation
gonna
like
say,
they did. I feel
yeah,
like really
that's
underprepared. But.
You don't have to have a presentation. Would you like to make any kind of statement?
Well, my budget's very basic. I mean, most of it is salaries, as you can see. I run pretty bare bones with the amount of staff that I have at this point. I think my office at one point was 8 people. We're down to 4 just because of efficiencies. And actually, if you'll notice, our budget has actually gone down from last year. So we do diligently try and save as much as we can on, things like printing and paper and envelopes and things like that. So really the only increase that we had this year was contractual salary increases.
Questions from counselors? Counselor Dolan.
So the one big jump that I saw was in that permanent full-time wages. That's all
Well, yeah,
contractual.
because we didn't budget for the 2% last year, so it's really a 4% shift.
So there's
from-
no new positions, there's no
Nope.
changeover of staff?
Nope.
Counselor Dolan.
The other line that caught my eye was 5319, the bond issue expense. That's gone up significantly since FY18. What's the specific reason for that?
We did not budget enough last year, so we are trying to make sure that we have enough in that line item to cover, basically, it covers any bond or ban issuances, so short-term or long-term debt. So,
Counselor House.
I have 2 questions. You said the budget had gone down.
yeah, from fiscal, actually, I thought it had.
Adopted.
Yeah, the adopted amount has gone.
It hasn't.
No,
What were we looking at earlier?
Maybe it went down from FY18.
Yeah.
It did go
it
down.
went down from FY18.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear that I was looking at the right thing.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. My second question is, do we believe that the line item that Counselor Dolan just referenced, the 5319, do we believe that 7,500 is enough this year?
I do, because I don't anticipate doing a whole lot of ban issuances in FY20. I want to hopefully just do one, and that will be it for the year.
And will we be bonding in FY20, or will we be bonding prior to FY20?
That largely depends on what happens with the audit.
Yeah.
We are trying to bond this
We
year.
are trying very diligently. It's been very challenging because this particular firm does not have Massachusetts municipal school experience, so it's been slower.
And in the event that we do not bond this year and it has to be pushed into the next budget year, what is our contingency plan? And do we have enough money, or are we going to have to?
We will have enough money in the budget.
And where will it come from?
We may have to shift some things around from the long-term bonded amount to other areas, depending on. how late we have to bond, and it depends on what happens with the audit, really, and how long it takes.
I just want to say that Kelly has diligently gone out and contacted the financial advisor to see what the impact will be.
If there is going to be an impact actually, if it does get pushed into 20, can the council be apprised of what
Absolutely.
the plan will be? Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
We should know by next month, I would think.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
whether or not that's going to have to happen.
Thank you.
Other questions from counselors on the treasurer-collector side of things? Seeing none, we're going to move to debt service. It's on page 130 of the budget book. Let's see. Where am I at?
And again, there's really nothing fancy to talk about here. These are all payments that we legally have to make for money that we've borrowed. The only thing that's estimated right now is the 2019 payment for the bond issue that we are planning on doing this year that may potentially shift to next year.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, Counselor Alice.
Okay. Am I correct that the total of the debt payment is the $1,624,000 plus the state qualified on the other page?
Yes.
It's been moved, so it looks like a significant drop when in fact it's not. So I just wanted to,
Yes, it all goes back to where that appears on the recap sheet.
Yep.
You know, it's just like an assessment, like school choice and charter assessment. It's deducted from our state aid.
Right.
So it eventually gets recorded where it needs to be recorded, but it's not part of the original operating budget.
yeah, and I'm
It's very confusing, I agree.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page, because the way that it looks in the book,
I know.
because of the way that it's in there, and I'm not saying that it's wrong, I'm just saying that.
One of the things I would like to do is the adopted budget really should be exactly what you voted, okay? And then the assessments could be added in as the amended, you know, so you can follow it along from start to finish.
We are, so if we do not bond in this fiscal year, then the principal pay down is what we would not be doing this year, or what's the total amount if we do not bond in this fiscal year?
If we don't bond this fiscal year, we will be responsible for an interest payment, and then whatever, we're gonna have to roll those bands over, so we will have to be paying interest for that, plus any other, additional issuance costs for both. So the money that's budgeted currently for the principal and the interest, if we bond this year, will cover any of those expenses if we have to push it forward.
And I know you don't, I'm assuming you don't have the answer because you don't have the numbers for that scenario. But would there be an excess in this line in that instance, do you think?
There could be, yeah.
That would potentially be the case?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Is it,
Alice.
sorry. Is it, I don't know if you have the exact number, but the number that I have is $4,122,630 for the total long-term debt. Does that sound correct?
For,
For the FY20 budget?
oh. Well, it's this 1.6 million plus that. Are you talking about with the enterprise funds and all that
No,
other
I'm
stuff,
talking the 1.624 long-term bonded debt plus the debt interest of 640,336 plus our state qualified debt.
Yeah, I don't.
So,
Yeah, I know which numbers you're talking about. I don't have a calculator in front of me.
right, so you would take this and just add the state qualified amounts,
And then also the debt interest, because that's a separate.
the temp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're adding the correct things together, whatever that comes out to.
I just
yes.
wanted to make sure that I was adding the right
Yes.
numbers together. Okay, I may have more questions as we go through the budgeting process, but that was my questions for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, Counselor Dolan?
Would you mind just refreshing my memory about that last line, the principal pay down? So that $313,000 in FY19 amended, that was the FEMA funds, right?
Some of it was FEMA and some of it was bond premiums, I believe, that we.
And some stabilization, or was that totally?
Yeah. Some was it was interest and pay downs. We moved some money around from FEMA stabilization and bond premiums that we had taken in.
Do you see any, do you anticipate that $25,000 number will be going up for any reason in FY20?
No, because we shouldn't have to we won't have any outstanding short-term debt at that point, so there shouldn't be anything that we have to pay down.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Counselor House?
My apologies. I used the 313 number and I was in the wrong column. So when I asked that question, that's why it was confusing. I'm sorry. In the event that we bond next year, though, the 25 that would be what would go up, correct?
No, we wouldn't have to make any additional pay downs.
Either way, there would
It's
be
just-
no additional payment.
No, it's just what we have budgeted for this
Okay.
year. That's all we have to make for
Okay,
pay downs.
thank you.
All right. Any further questions for our finance team? All right. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Okay, so, I'll just note for counselors that we did receive a presentation from Smith Voc, but, and, I would encourage you to go over that on your own time. But at this time, we'll invite Superintendent Harper and Chair Nunez and any representatives of the Greenfield Public Schools.
Just type in. See what happened there?
Oh, and we need another chair.
You went to the left and all. Yeah. I don't know what happened. It went to, I can't because what happened was it switched the screen. So, hold on. I'm not sure what happened. I think it went off.
It's all right, I hate PowerPoints.
We got it in front of us, don't we?
Okay, I just want to go look at the opposite.
Say again? Well,
I think he's technically correct. The one he got was PowerPoint.
We'll just hold it up so everyone can see it. Just a little technical difficulty here, everyone. Just another minute, and then we'll start either way.
We're just showing the public how long it takes for us to utilize our technology, because we could really upgrade our tech.
Pretty sure it takes everyone this long to operate a projector.
It's going to take a couple of more minutes. I know, but it's going to take a couple of more minutes. Almost there.
Okay. Making progress, everyone.
It's just like a human swirly wheel.
Take it, that's progress.
Yep, 82,302.
Is it ready?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
Looks like we're in business.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to talk about our schools tonight. And we've put together a very abbreviated presentation, so hopefully we can spend the majority of the time on any questions that counselors may have. All right, so the first is looking at the school committee budget. In FY19, the school committee voted a budget of $18,575,000, and that was a local appropriation of $6,313,038. In FY20, the school committee voted a budget of $19,970,347, and of that, the local request was for $6,616,509. So you can see the change from FY19 to FY20 in the local request was just under $300,000. The $300,000 increase in the school committee budget, which we spent about 6 months debating at the subcommittee, budget and finance, and full committee level, was strategic investments that had to do with new programs to attract students, to meet current needs like alternative programming, and to actually spend money to save money. So an example was there was coverage today of a proposal for transportation in which we invest in some infrastructure in vans for transportation, but that cost brings a 3-to-1 return in terms of cost savings. I'd like to talk briefly about the FY20 budget process for the school department. It is a little unique from other departments that work in the city budget because your budget book correctly describes department requests as one of the categories. And in the budget put forward by the school committee's budget is called the department request, which then goes to the mayor's budget. But actually in the school budget, the best description for the department request would be the principal's request, and under Mass General Law and site-based management, the principals do have to make recommendations about their own budget, and they made very reasonable requests. And the principals, as well as the department heads, for example, the tech director or the transportation director, put together requests. Those requests, even when winnowed down, were $21 million. The superintendent's budget, as it was put forward, was then reduced by over $1 million, and I recommended a budget of $19,970,000. And after lengthy deliberation, the school committee approved that budget. And as you know, you have a budget book in front of you, and you're reviewing now the mayor's budget proposal, which is a budget at $18,625,000. The city council budget line is blank on purpose because who knows? It's your move.
You could have put your proposed in there.
What's that?
You put proposed in.
We could have put proposed, yes.
Back to 21.
We could have done lots of things. It's a blank slate. All right, now I'd like to talk a little bit about Chapter 70 state aid. And as you heard in the previous conversation about the tech school, there were slight adjustments in their budget from Chapter 70. And there is obviously a statewide conversation going on right now about changing the funding formula. So over the past several years, we've had very modest increases. And looking back, they've been less than 1% increase. Most years, about a 0.5% increase since the last big adjustment, which was about 13% adjustment in 2014. So looking over the last several years, the Chapter 70 funding has been, you could describe it as relatively stable. But in FY20, according to the governor's budget proposal, Greenfield is expected to receive $1.1 million in Chapter 70 increase in state aid. And not to pick on Josh from the Recorder, but there was local media today that reported on the Chapter 70 increase, and sometimes this is described as we will be receiving $1 million from the state. We will be receiving $1 million additional increase. You can see the projected total there would be $13,353,000 in Chapter 70 state aid for education to Greenfield in FY20. So I'm going to ask Steve to talk a little bit about what is Chapter 70 in terms of allowable expenses, since we are focused a little bit on that change in our budget due to increased Chapter 70 funding.
Okay, part of our difficulty with this budget is that the mayor's budget calls for a $50,000 increase in the operational side, which is a very tough task to overcome. So that 50,000, when you look at the 50,000, compare it to the 1.1 million in Chapter 70, you say, well, how could that be? And it stems from the Chapter 70 and the net school spending formula. The state gives the town money under the Chapter 70. That's that $1.1 million increase. Now, when the state gives you money, they want some accountability with that. So what they do is they create this net school spending requirement. And that's how they measure your compliance with spending that money, because Chapter 70 money must be used for school operations, both direct meaning in the classroom, kids, teachers, salaries, textbooks, pens, computers, all that type of stuff, and then indirect, and those are the costs associated with insurances, health insurances, retirement, and those types of things. So when they prescribe how you're going to use the money, they say there are some eligible costs and ineligible costs associated with that, and this slide sets out that. First, salaries for teachers, paraprofessionals, those types of salaries are eligible. Operational expense, health book, textbooks, classroom supplies, those types, as well as city indirect costs, which are electricity, health insurance, retirement, things like that, not included in net school spending formula. And this is 603 CMR 10, where it sets out specifically what is included and what is not included, is long-term debt servicing for capital projects, costs for employees not affiliated with the school system, so you just can't use the money to fund city operations, costs associated with regional or vocational schools. That's your Smith Voc, your Franklin County Tech, and then other non-educational municipal costs. So that is how they account for your use of Chapter 70 funds. This is the cherry sheet receipts. So this is the Greenfield cherry sheet net revenue. So per the governor's budget, the city will realize a net increase of 1.6 million over 19 receipts. That is mostly made up of the Chapter 70. 1.1 makes up a bulk of the cherry sheet receipts. Well, on the other side of the ledger, there is a decrease in expenses on the cherry sheet. So there is a little bit more money coming in. The state expected receipts have increased since the mayor's budget, so as they're deliberating, more money is flowing to us, which is a good problem to have, as well as the Chapter 70. I think the last one we saw was an increase in the Ways and Means budget of about $60,000 in Chapter 70. So the good news is that's increasing as we go. This next slide kind of sets out what's going on with the increase of $50,000 to the operational budget. Like I said before, there's two components to this. One is the operational budget, and one is the indirect costs. Both are school expenses. There is absolutely no question about that. The operations, which are kids in the classroom, and the indirect costs, which are those health insurances and things like that. Both are educational expenses. Once you net out your Chapter 70 revenue, you will see the total cost of the school operations to the city. Last year, the total school operations to the city increased by $676,000. This year, it's decreasing by about $640,000. So what's happening here is that because the operational side is essentially level funded, and you're gaining about 1.1 million increase in revenue, the net cost to the city for education, that is direct and indirect, is going down. Because you're an above net school spending, you're allowed to do this because you're above the minimum. And you basically, this budget recaptures a lot of that cost through the additional 1.1 million and the level funding of the operation side.
In the next slide, we talk a little bit about capital, which we understand you're not deliberating in this particular session in this budget book, but it is obviously in front of the
Tonight.
Later in the agenda, but not as part of the education budget in this portion. So we just want to touch on it to say that it affects operations and it affects the general climate within which the schools function, and it is before the council. So I do want to make the cumulative effect of requests. We are very cognizant that we're not the only department. We have to work within the means and so forth. But when you look at a reduction between the school committee budget of 1.3 million to the mayor's budget, and you take that in the context of other ways in which the schools are really being creative and using resources when there are needs in front of us every day in the buildings, in the schools, this compounds the difficulty, and it makes it difficult to attract good staff. It makes it difficult to retain families. It makes it difficult to say that Greenfield Public Schools are where you should bring your child because it's the best environment. And that is what we would like to be able to continue to do. So we'd like to pose this as an opportunity. In the deliberation at the school committee, we talked a lot about the Chapter 70 state aid, and we see this as an opportunity for this state aid to flow to Greenfield. In addition to this Chapter 70, if you were paying attention to the papers earlier this week, you would have seen that the state auditor has called for an additional assessment from the state, specifically in Greenfield, and this is credit to the mayor for raising this topic. It was on the discussion on the school side for a very long time, and the mayor sort of took up this banner and petitioned the state to look at it as an unfunded mandate. And while they didn't identify it as an unfunded mandate, they said absolutely the state should be paying the costs for communities that house and shelter and educate students in foster care. And in Greenfield alone, this report was based on Greenfield's data and the work of folks here. $700,000 per year at a minimum is attributed to what the state should be picking up, and another $200,000 in transportation costs. That means we've been absorbing those costs within our budget, and it's now being recognized that those are costs that should have been borne by the state. Because of the timing, it is possible that that state aid could be adjusted in this funding formula. Obviously, it's not known, but at this point, it is on the radar and could be addressed while in this legislative session. What we've done in this proposal is actually balance the school department budget by using this state revenue and applying it to our needs in the school department budget. Oh, we're going to lose this. It's okay, you have it in front of me. We also are low tech. We're going to keep going, and we're almost at the end. One of the important things about our request is that we are not asking you to reduce police, fire, the other valuable services in our city. We also depend on, rely on, and recognize the value of those services. But we believe that in a year where you have such a significant windfall, that this is the right time to right-size your budget and at the same time create a sustainable plan for your revenue, including your revolving funds. So last year we sort of patched a gap and the council stepped in and filled a need. And we talked about one-time funding. And we said the council stepped forward and the school department agreed to draw down on one-time funds that we knew was a short-term solution. And with this Chapter 70 funding, generally it becomes a recurring revenue stream. So you have actually an opportunity to solve a long-term problem with an opportunity that doesn't unfairly burden the community or the taxpayer. So we think this is a sustainable plan and creates fiscal stability. I have included here the comment about the auditor's call for $700,000 to be returned to Greenfield annually based on the mayor's request and the school department and school committee's request. And then the question becomes, what would it take if nothing changed and the school department needed to balance to the mayor's budget? You saw in the tech school slide that the majority is always salary. I think they said that over 50% is salaries. And in our budget, that 74% or more is in salaries. That doesn't include individual contractors that are actually billed through a different avenue, so it's actually greater than 74%. Our budget is people. A number of those people are sitting in the room tonight. They're the ones that make our schools work. We have a number of units up for negotiation. We don't always have the best pay, but we have the best people, and we need these people. The next slide talks about what would a $1.3 million cut look like in the Greenfield Public Schools. Our principals put together scenarios. Our principals put together scenarios to balance to this because we always balance to the budget that we're given. They did this while calling it devastating. District-wide, we would first cut all the programs that we worked hard to create and that we spent a year developing, building, and working through our school committee to get approved. And that would return revenue and do the right things for kids. Next, we would institute busing fees, cut athletics, cut our supply lines across the board, and cut administration at the district level to balance to $500,000 at the district level. At the preschool, we would increase the tuition. We would cut the newly hired part-time principal. And then we would cut technology and music. At the elementary schools, we would cut at least one classroom teacher at each school, and then reduce our arts and music to part-time at the elementary level. And then we would cut supplies because they're already very meager, but we would rather cut supplies than people. At the middle school, we would cut classroom teachers, but mostly music, band, technology, Spanish, and art. Then we would cut instructional assistants. At the high school, we have looked at a couple of different scenarios. The most likely is cutting culinary, music, some of our special education staff, and combining special ed programs, and cut AP classes. We believe those total reductions would equal $1.3 million. I would like to say that some of these cuts, while they would save money on paper, are likely to increase costs in the long run. An example would be if a student in our schools has a special education paraprofessional and that person is cut, that student is legally obligated to receive those services, and if we cannot provide them, they would go to another district, causing that student and their choice money to leave, or they could possibly go to an out-of-district placement, which routinely costs between $45,000 and $300,000 per student per year. When you think of an instructional assistant at a fraction of that salary, that is not money well spent. We believe that utilizing the state aid that's in front of us is a preferable solution. I will close by trying to be optimistic. We would like to think of Greenfield Public Schools in terms of our vision for it and what the people sitting behind us tonight have worked to achieve, which is that Greenfield Public Schools is the choice-in destination in Franklin County. At Greenfield High School, the beautiful new building that this council supported and this community voted for, we receive 5 to 6 telephone calls each day from parents asking to choice in to Greenfield High School. That's because of our AP offerings, our incredible staff, our electives, and our athletics, and our great teachers. We'd like to continue and maintain strong community partnerships with GCC. We've created amazing programs that are successful, and we'd like them to continue and expand. Our strong AP offerings and our rigorous program of studies at all schools. We'd like to expand and continue our electives. Keep fee-free athletics, which is the right thing to do and makes our community proud. We'd like to be able to provide our mandated services to students, and we'd like a sustainable revenue and expenditure plan for the future, and we'd like to continue to provide an exceptional education to all students by our Greenfield Public School staff. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Madam Superintendent. So just to talk about how this is gonna work, we're gonna address the school's operating budget first. We'll take questions from counselors first, and then I'll try to take some questions from the audience. Counselors, do you have questions? Counselor Alice.
Well, it's almost like you read my mind, because I was looking for the detail on what the outcome would be from the mayor's budget. So thank you for at least putting that together. As difficult and painful as it is to even read, it's something that needs to be viewed by all of us and the public, so that we know what the ramifications are of what we choose to do. I guess my first question would probably be for your business manager, or anyone who's up here. As I look at the revenues from the cherry sheet, which is on 37. Obviously, I see the increase in Chapter 70 of approximately the 1.1 or so, right? Is that correct? Have you gone through the city budget and as an entire document? I mean, is there any light that you can shed as to where this 1.1 may be flowing to? I just curious if you...
Actually, yeah. When you look at this cherry sheet summary on page 37, what's missing is the expense side of it.
Okay.
So that's an important piece. And then when that 1.1 million, so 50,000 is going for operational, the other $1,040,000 is going to indirect costs associated with the schools.
But it's not being reflected in the mayor's budget, in the mayor's proposed budget, as going to the schools. Is that correct?
Oh, it is. It is. There's no question that it's going to the schools, but it's going towards the indirect side, which is the health insurance.
Oh, okay, so it's being applied to the essentially what I would say is the offsets from health insurance, retirement, all that stuff. Okay.
That's exactly right.
So, okay, so that's where we see that going. Okay. what you gave us was enlightening, so I'm going to have to try to match the two together. So I may not formulate the right questions tonight, but I may
Call me if you have any
plenty more questions
questions,
for you. It's just, I'm going to need to look at that stuff and actually formulate those two things together. So thank you for that answer. I will have more questions for you. Thank you.
Counselor Dolan.
So in the devastating scenario that you have laid out, once you take out supplies and other incidentals, how many people are we talking about? How many jobs? Do you have this a ballpark estimate?
Yeah, this is just a ballpark estimate right here. So I'm thinking around between teachers, paras, other staff, around 15 to 20 people.
And is there money available in any revolving funds at this time?
That's the key to this budget. Is last year we used 2.8 million in revolving on only 2 million in revenues in revolving, so that creates the $800,000 gap that we've been talking about for a long time. There is some money in the revolving account that you can throw towards this problem. However, if you deplete it a second year, you're going to create a tremendous cliff in the third year, and then on top of that, you'll have a fairly steep increase in salaries as the contracts come due and things like that. So there is some, I wouldn't recommend using it all, but I believe there is some play there, but not a lot.
Can you speak to any longer term trends in terms of have we been depleting it for longer than, has this been a consistent trend?
I think it's been a consistent trend, and it's been bits and pieces. Last year was a large chunk of it, though.
Okay.
Those accounts will be depleted in short order at the rate that they have been spent. And our concern is that if we could continue to apply additional revolving fund revenue, but if the Chapter 78 is not addressed in the budget or accounted for in the budget, then next year's cycle would be far worse than this year's cycle.
Councilor Dolan?
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the proposal. Do you mind if I just repeat it back to you and you can correct me if I'm missing something? So the state has recognized that they are responsible for that $700,000 to $900,000, but has not attached any specifics to that.
I would characterize this as the state auditor has recognized that it is the responsibility of the Commonwealth to pick up the cost of educating for foster children in a community where they're not contributing to the tax base because they are mobile between different things, or they are a ward of the state, if you will. But it has not yet been taken up by the legislature, so it remains to be seen if or how they will act on that. There are a number of provisions being debated right now actively that could bring additional relief. I've been meeting with legislatures for the last several months while they've been in session, and we're seeing things like fully funding circuit breaker would bring another $220,000 into Greenfield in particular. So there's a number of things already on the books that could be fully funded. There's a number of ways that they're exploring addressing this funding formula. This is a new one, so I'm particularly excited about it because it was previously unidentified as something that the state could even consider picking up.
So essentially the ask is that the council fund the 1.3 million over and above the mayor's budget, which we are able to do, without necessarily a guarantee that that funding is going to come through from the state, but with a likelihood that the legislature will take that up and it will be in the budget and it will eventually make its way to Greenfield.
I'm not sure that it's the ask exactly. I think what we're asking that you consider is that even the governor's budget, which is generally, as you heard in the previous presentation, generally considered the floor, even that level of funding presents an additional $1.1 million of funding, which has historically gone directly to the school expenses, not the indirect costs. So if you were to apply only that most conservative conservative measure. Looking at the Ways and Means, it's gone up. Looking at future versions, it's likely to go up. You may, in addition, get this 700,000, but I'm actually not asking anybody to bank on that. I'm sort of asking, looking at the more conservative figures, and for the council to take that into your deliberation. I'm not looking to tie your hands at this point, simply trying to make sure that you're aware of all the facts.
Thank you. Councilor Alice.
So I'm looking at our miscellaneous in our budget book, which is on page 49. And this is more of just a comment, and then I'm going to have a question. FY19, our total miscellaneous was $12,288,503. Mayor's proposed FY20, $13,465,359, approximately $1.2 million increase. My comment is, I don't understand how the entire school department is the only reason for the increase, and why the entire amount would be borne by the school department, when that's, even if we were going to do that, we should be breaking it out by the percentage, and that percentage should be then allotted. It seems interesting that the health insurance, as a matter of fact, only went up $307,000. I guess what I would ask you to get for me is what you believe the percentage of the school's portion of those increases would be, if that's something that you could get for me at a later date, not right now. Just so if you're following me, what I'm suggesting is the entire town's increase in the miscellaneous line has been borne by the money that was meant to be for the students in the schools. Is that a fair statement? Do we see it the same way, or am I out of line?
I would say that of the 1.1 million, it's all going to the schools. So that there's no question about that. It's because you're so far above minimum school spending, you're bringing that cost down, and then as it conglomerates within the budget, yes, it does look like that, but it is going towards the schools.
Right, and I understand that. What I'm saying is, we bear on the city side, so to speak, a certain amount every year and a certain amount last year. So it seems unrealistic to then forget what we had spent last year, the portion of, to then say this year, well, we're just going to spend it all on. I think that's what you're saying, and I'm trying to make sure that we're talking the same language here.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
So, there is an increase in the miscellaneous side, which I would say, I don't have those numbers as far as how it's broken out by each the school versus the city, but I do have a guess at what it's going to be. So if health insurance goes up by 2.5%, just say if retiree goes up by 10%. So we're going to use a big number there. The portion that belongs to the school is probably 50 to 60%. So if it goes up by 800,000, 400,000 will be the school side. So then you have the 1.1 million bucks, let's say, for round numbers. 400,000 is going to the increase in operational costs. That leaves 600,000. So you're reducing your burden above net school spending by 600,000.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe we're on the same page. We're just coming at it from two different directions.
I would direct people's attention to page 13, which does enumerate the total town-side school costs, and you can see that the increase is, well, this doesn't have FY20.
It stops at an FY19 estimate.
Yeah. In the past, there were some big increases. Councilor Dolan.
just still trying to wrap my head around all of this. If we could go to the second slide in the presentation. I just want to, yes, the FY20 school committee budget. I just want to clarify that FY19 is FY19 revised, right? With the additional funds that were appropriated. And FY20 is the school committee's budget prior to the mayor's cuts.
That's correct.
So the local request, when you factor in inflation, was basically almost level.
Yes.
More or less. So this is actually a budget cut from the town side if we were to adopt the mayor's budget. The local request would be lower than last year.
Exactly, because you're factoring in all that
Yeah.
1.1 million, yes.
Yes. And I had another question, but you can come back to me.
All right. Counselor Alice.
So to be clear, the worst-case scenario that you drafted for us would be what would happen if you were funded at, say, exactly what you were funded at last year, which is essentially what this is.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Dolan.
And sorry, just another clarification. So the proposal that's in the budget book includes essentially all of the cuts that you laid out in the devastating scenario, plus cutting almost all of your capital requests. It's both of those, right?
No, capital is separate.
It doesn't address the capital.
Capital is separate, okay. Yes, but in addition to receiving essentially this cut in what the town is providing, you would also, according to the budget book that we got, have most of your capital.
That's correct.
That we can discuss at a later date.
As an example, prior to one of the department requests that came forward for capital was actually in infrastructure needs like servers, so some of our technology infrastructure. And there's a debate there whether that belongs in capital or does not belong in capital. Regardless, it's been brought forward in capital because they're long-term investments in expensive equipment that is well outside the operational budget. And there was a request that the school committee endorsed of approximately $300,000. And that request was funded at zero. So the natural extension would be that should be in your operational budget. We might agree with you, but we do not have any capacity in our budget to increase to absorb technology. And not only that, we're further reducing by 1.3 million.
I have a few remarks.
Please, Chair Nunez.
Thank you, everyone, for this thoughtful deliberation. I just want to say that the school committee budget was a reflection of our values. And it was a reflection of investing in quality programming for our students that in the long term is going to be great for the city of Greenfield, great for our students, and continue to build strong relationships with other partners in education here in Franklin County. We have had considerable deliberation and input from our community related to cuts that were proposed early on. Some of you were tapped into that conversation. I heard from some counselors and did check in with some counselors early on about that. And the school committee voted to retain what we have because we believe it's the best thing for our kids. And, you know, I stand here before you very proud of the Greenfield Public Schools. It's my understanding that we employ just over 400 people. That is something to be very, very proud of. This is our local money staying local. We are feeding families. We are educating our kids to the best of our ability. And any additional state aid that we have should be reflected and sent straight to the classrooms. Obviously, the school committee will have a lot to consider moving forward, and you all have a lot to consider in your deliberation. But the mayor requests that we take a leadership role, and I would say that we do have a leadership role here in Franklin County. Our superintendent is out and about building relationships every day. Our district receives recognition all the time for what we're putting, the practices that we're putting forward and initiatives and investment that we're putting into our schools. The mayor states that it's a competitive environment for education, and that's true. When we were deliberating the school committee budget, I read that Montague was prepared to build programming for extended child care. I might be not utilizing the correct terms for that, but what I'm saying is that they're investing in their schools, they're investing in their kids, and what are we going to do? We need to rise to that. This is not a burden. Educating our youth is not a burden. It's a responsibility. And I think that our community actually has the capacity to provide for our kids. And again, this is an opportunity for leadership. And I support you in your deliberations, and I hope that there's a way that we can find I know that each of you supports our Greenfield Public Schools, and I thank you for all that you're putting in. And as a final thought related to the sort of city-side costs, and as Steve, our business manager, has mentioned, these are real educational costs. And part of the reason why there is ongoing conversation about state support for education is because there is an understanding that these costs are growing and that it's difficult for communities to keep up with them. However, we don't have clear figures on what those costs are. We're working on estimates. The school committee's requested that information. It's my understanding that we still don't have clear numbers on what those costs are. So I'm looking forward to seeing those clear numbers as this deliberation continues, and seeing how we can continue to build our district. Again, I just want to reflect back that we employ over 400 people that are fantastic employees. This is an investment in our community. This is an investment in our youth. Our employees are not overpaid. We are not overstaffed. We heard from experts from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees actually indicating that we are understaffed in teachers. And so with this proposed cut to the school committee budget, as you can see by some of the emotional response today, this is quite devastating. So thank you all. And again, I look forward to continued conversation, and the school committee will obviously be deliberating again and making decisions about what we can do. As in my time on the committee, and far before I was even involved with the Greenfield Public Schools, there has been a real commitment to preserving electives, to building the district, to ensuring that our quality program is accessible to as many students and families as possible. And I know that the group that we have now, the school committee now, is also committed to that. And so we will look to every possible way to ensure that we do preserve this programming as we move forward with this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that we are all extremely sympathetic to the moral argument that you and Superintendent Harper make. It's a strong one. And the question before us is pragmatic. And I think that's what we're going to hopefully address in our further questions. Councilor Alice?
Yeah, tonight, I mean, I appreciate hearing all the information, and the questions that I'm asking are not an indication of how I plan to make any changes or do what I need to do. But I'm looking for the outcome of what those decisions could be. And my question is, on your scenario of level funding, essentially, which is what it is, how I know you have contractual deadlines on when you have to let people, so for example, if this budget stands the way that it is, what is the time frame, and how would these all have to be done immediately? Is it a cascading thing where there's a chance that if the state comes through with more money, can you just sort of outline the time frame for that?
So we do have contractual deadlines to provide reasonable assurance to employees that they have a job. So generally in May and in June, we are sending out those notices. Given the uncertainty, we are already taking precautions, including a freeze on our budget. So any non-discretionary spending has already been slowed. They're requiring pre-approvals. This means that teachers that want to go to professional development or conferences are being told that they can't go, and that even expenses like classroom paper and things like that, unless they have pre-approval, are currently on hold. So those are already in effect. Next would be notification of pink slips or reduction in force. We do issue pink slips to try to give people as much notice as possible, and we do have to meet contractual deadlines. And so that means that those would be going out shortly. And we would pink slip to the point that we could reasonably meet the budget that's in front of us at the time that those deadlines come up. So I think May 15th is what's in my head as contractual deadline, so in short order. I'm sorry, there was one other part of your question. So there are some aspects of those cuts that could delay shortly for some period of time. An example is the busing. So we could wait to see if we need to implement a pay-to-ride kind of system until later in the summer. The problem with that is families need time to plan those expenses as well. There is a place here. I'm presenting possible scenarios, but there's two difficulties. One is that people listening can begin to make decisions now based on the uncertainty, and sometimes that means that they look elsewhere, and we want them to know that we are planning for the worst, but we are optimistic that there are some ways that we can retain the key core programmatic services, and that even things like transportation are important. When the school committee considered this, parents came out in droves and said, I can't get my child to school any other way. I work a second job. I have mobility issues. You know, we live in New England. I can't walk my child to school down streets and so forth. So those are considerations. The second is that the school committee does have to vote on the final budget. So if there is a cut from the school committee budget to the mayor's budget of $1.3 million, the superintendent is tasked with essentially proposing how to meet that, but it does have to go back to the school committee for a vote. So what's in front of you tonight are proposals, and they would need further discussion, and it would need a school committee vote. So we're doing our best to provide you specifics of what it would look like on the ground. These are real people, and real families will be affected, and we want to give you the information, and we will begin taking steps to prepare for whatever budget comes down.
Thank you. Councilor Alice.
Okay, yes, thank you. Thank you for that answer. I guess I will share that the real issue, I learned some new information just today that I didn't have previous to today, obviously. And Councilor Dolan brought that to my mind. What we did last year when we appropriated more than what the bottom line of the budget was, there's a mass general law statute that our city has not adopted that allows for that. The only reason that actually went through is because it was signed and that went through. Were we to do that again, I have a feeling that it would not actually hold. And that puts us in more of a bind, because what that means is that we have to find the money within the budget if we're going to make any changes to the mayor's budget. The only other option is to not vote the budget, but then it's a 1/12 budget, which is level funded. However, it's only a 1/12 budget until a budget is adopted. So unfortunately, I think for me personally, and I think most of my colleagues, hopefully all of them, we'll be looking very deep into not specifically your budget, but all of the departments in here to try to figure out a way to work within it. And I'm hopeful that we can find a way to not make it look like the worst case scenario. But I did want to share the fact that we can't do what we did last year. I don't believe that we would get away with what we did last year. Not that we did anything wrong. We didn't know we were doing something that we really couldn't do. But I don't believe that we're going to be able to do that thing again. So I wanted to be, I found that out today at about 3 o'clock. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page because we had done that last year, and I'm not exactly sure that that's going to work again unless that statute is voted on.
We recognize that the council is in a difficult position as well, as is the school committee and school department, but we wanted to bring that information forward.
Thank you. Councilor Dolan.
I'd just like to ask Councilor Alice which statute specifically that is, because we had a pretty clear legal opinion last year.
I will get that for you. I don't have it in my mind, but I will get it.
If I could add one comment, I think the question or the way that I frame this is, if there's a level funded local contribution and $1.1 million or more in state aid coming to Greenfield, the schools have not increased the budget by $1 million. We've relied more heavily on state aid, and we've reduced our reliance on one-time funds that are about to run out. And we're trying to plan for the future. If we've had a level funded local budget and $1 million more in state aid, it would be helpful to have more accurate information about a corresponding increase in city-side costs that would necessitate the city having that revenue applied to legitimate costs. So we don't at all dispute the fact that school employees have costs that are associated with their retirement, with their insurance, and that the very positive relationship with maintenance and DPW have indirect costs to the school department, which we contribute to. That's all non-disputable. I think the question is just why the increase in those indirect costs in a year that the state has recognized that the state's contribution to education in Greenfield is insufficient. That seems like the time to apply state aid to our classrooms first.
Thank you. Councilor Dolan?
I actually just want to make a comment that I'm absolutely supportive of what you say. I think it's a shame with the additional, it would be a shame if we took the increased liability for retirement from our children. I think that would be morally wrong. I also think it goes against the very nature of public education and the ideals of public education to charge for things like busing and athletics. And I think you're absolutely right that it pays in the long run to have schools that people want to send their children to. We want to be the choice in destination for the whole region. So I intend to work as hard as I can to make sure that we find as much money as we possibly can to fill that gap.
Thank you.
I'm going to come back to a question I already asked, just to see if you can answer it. If council was not able to do anything, could not find a way to mitigate this cut, would you take from revolving funds? And if so, how much? And if so, would you have a sense of what could be kept from the list of cuts that we have before us?
The mayor is fond of saying that once you put things together, it's difficult to pull them apart, like separating electrons. And I'll use that analogy here. I think the issue is you have not enough money in the bank to fund an expense. And so the question is, what stays and what goes? And I think it's clear that all of these expenses are actually in the long run the cheapest option. So we could throw one-time funds at all of these expenses and deplete all of our reserves, But then next year, the gap is going to be even wider, and we're going to be in front of you saying, now we have a $2 million deficit. So the answer is the school committee will have to look long and hard at this. In short, we're actually doing 2 budget cycles. So the school committee spent the better part of this year developing a $19 million, $970,000 budget. And now we're building a different budget. And you can't actually build a thoughtful budget in a couple of weeks that you spent all year working hard to build. Not if you're meeting contractual deadlines, not if our administrators are also in classrooms, not if our superintendent is also lobbying legislators for state funding. The answer is probably a combination, but it's going to take some continual time to figure that out. None of these cuts are desirable because we are already at a level that we've made these cuts every year. We've cut I don't know where else to cut from except I think we looked recently and 80% of our instructional assistants are attached to an individualized education plan. Essentially, they're legally mandated to be in our buildings. And special education teachers, same thing. Behaviorists, same thing. So, I think some of the things, unfortunately, that are the first things to be cut are the things that are going to be saving us money and putting us in a better position next year. It's the penny wise, pound foolish. So we'll be looking long and hard at that. Of course, we'd rather spend down reserves than lay off a person. At the same time, we're not here for the short term. We're here this year and next year. People are going to need to have a job and a family and a roof over their head next year too. So we're looking for that opportunity for recurring, regular, stable state source of income to provide an education to our students, which is what it's based on. You heard from the tech school that a lot of areas are experiencing declining enrollment. Greenfield is not. We're steady, we're rising, but we are experiencing students coming in that have a typically higher than average cost per pupil in terms of the cost of educating them. English language learners need support. Students who have specialized education needs need support. Advanced placement courses actually cost more to provide, but guess what? I'm really glad we have them.
Thank you. This is a hard conversation. The reality is that we're probably talking about cuts we're talking about cuts to people on either side of this, even if the council finds money somewhere to put back into this budget and is allowed to, we're still talking about cuts to human beings. So it's a really tough discussion.
I have one.
Yeah, Chair Nunez.
So a pending question is, what if we do receive additional Chapter 70 aid? What if we do receive $700,000 magically to support our foster students? If that occurs, it's unclear to me what path we would take to be able to utilize that funding. The mayor has proposed a split of 70-30, I believe. It's in the mayor's budget for any additional Chapter 70 funding that may be coming our way. And so we will need to work out any potential process as to what we need to do to actually be able to utilize that funding. And I just want to make that a part of the conversation, because this is, again, these are these unknowns, and from the way things are looking, we will be receiving additional state aid.
Right, that's a very good comment. I think as one of you said, there's already about $60,000 identified that could be additional. Did you have a question, Councilor Alice? No. All right. At this time, okay, Councilor Dolan?
Just to clarify that, so it's possible that we could pass out a bunch of pink slips in June and then receive funding for those positions later on.
That's a fun system. Councilor Alice.
Yeah, and that's kind of why the timeline is such a pain, because we don't even vote on the budget until after they're contractually obligated to send out pink slips to begin with. So if they have a May 15th deadline, we don't even vote on our budget till the end of May. So it happens every year, and there's nothing we can do about it. other than, well, actually, we can't even do that. So there's absolutely nothing that we can do about it. It's really, every year it frustrates me, and I'm sure it frustrates everyone else in this room.
So we are going to transition in a moment to the capital side of things, but I am going to take questions from the audience. And I just want to point out that we are in a process here, everyone. This is a budget process, and we have a lot of work to do. And I absolutely want to hear your arguments and anything that you have to say. If you want to speak to the school, I'm not shutting that down, but I do want you to please direct your questions towards the more pragmatic side of things if possible. So are there questions? And Councilor Burson?
Is the shortfall because of the fact that the retirement account, if you will, is underfunded for a bunch of years?
Mr. Mayor, would you like to step to the table?
Sure.
And I think if Liz. So I believe the question is
this 30% allocation that you suggested, 7% to the school side.
No one can hear you.
I have to believe that people can't hear me. My God. In any event, the 30% allocation to the what I affectionately call the fixed cost compared to the educational cost, 70%. And that is to pay for retirement. But is that because of the fact that the retirement was underfunded? Why isn't that retirement at the place that it should be? Is there something missing in terms of more people retiring or additional costs of retirement?
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've actually asked probably 4 or 5 questions. So let me take the first part, the 70/30. So the Chapter 70 money, including the $1.1 million increase, is 100% dedicated to the school budget. So that should be a settled question. All of the Chapter 70 is going. The mention of Chapter 70/30 was in discussions with members of the school committee and the business manager and the superintendent, was that any additional funds beyond the increased $1.1 million of Chapter 70 would be split 70/30, 70 to the school and 30% to the town, the city.
This is the $700,000 to $800,000 number.
No, that's another question.
All right.
So
help me out.
So the 70/30 is only for additional funds. So to date, because we only worked on the governance budget, which indicated the $1.1 million increase in Chapter 70, the House budget indicates there might be about, I think it's $204 million additional to Chapter 70. So to put it in some frame of a wallet, of that $206 million or so, Greenfield would get about $59,000. So that's hardly anything. Right. You can imagine how underfunded the state education program is. So because that $70,000 or $59,000 is additional, that would come under my agreement with the school department to go 70/30. 70 to the school department, 30 to the city. Because any action by the school department has a ripple effect on expenses in the city side in a number of different areas. And I believe we sent out city side cost educational expenses to a number of different people, but I'll make sure we get it out again. So the other part of your question is pension. So the pension, Massachusetts as a state, I think, is several tens of billions of dollars in unfunded pension liability. Greenfield, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's around 85 or 88 million in pension liability. So we have around 2012 or 2013, the state refinanced its pensions for all the cities and towns. The object was to go to 2040. Greenfield chose to go to 2038. And so 2038 for 100% payoff. Right now, I think we're at 57%. So, and our term is, instead of 2038, it's 2036, because we've been paying a chunk. This year, our increase was about a little over 650,000. So that's the increase that hits that miscellaneous category, the contribution, pension contribution. So of that 650,000, it's probably 250 to 300,000 minimum for the school department. So let's go back to the Chapter 70. All of the Chapter 70 money has been dedicated to the school department, 100%. The extra expenses are being financed by the city.
But you're not allocating it to what I would call the operation. You're not allocating it to the operational side. This is not totally. That's what I got from the.
Are you talking pension of Chapter 70? 100% of Chapter 70 is going to the school department.
But a certain part of it is going to I would call it passive costs and not.
No, 100% is going to the school department. That's for all, that's the department. They don't pay any heat, electricity,
I understand
pension, health insurance.
Once it goes through that funnel, when it comes out, I think what the superintendent was saying, that the school department is not getting the entire amount because of the allocation that you made.
But could I, if I may, step in, just to clarify, I understand, I believe that we're talking about a fairness issue, of the fairness of an increase not going to operations as many people would like it to. I believe, unfortunately, there's the fairness issue of the city side taking on a lot of school side expenses for years past. And so this is still not, even with the amount that was this 1.1 million, even dedicating that to school side costs, it does not cover all of them. So I guess just in terms of my process, I think it's important to recognize it's unfair, but are there alternatives? Is there other ways to find efficiencies? I think for our budget-making process, all we can do is recognize that there are some extremely unfair things that may happen, but we're dealing with a budget that changes from year to year.
Right, if I may just follow up with that thought, the counselor might be referring to the contribution to the school department from the city, and I think the superintendent mentioned that, maybe the business manager, regarding the amount the city is paying to the school department in addition to the Chapter 70 is down a little bit. So it's down because our other expenses are up a lot. So that's why that's come down. The anticipation of additional monies in Chapter 70, I agree with the superintendent that there's been a lot of discussion in Boston, particularly in education, particularly with the reform. There's probably going to be more money. And the Senate has been talking $1 billion increase to education. If the House does $206 million and the Senate is starting at $1 billion, then somewhere in the middle you can expect the conference committee to meet, and so that will be more money in Chapter 70. But there is a dilemma, as Councilor Ellis points out, and they got contractual obligations on May 15th. The council doesn't vote till May 29th. We don't really get a budget in motion for 6 weeks after that. And in the meantime, there are ripple expenses. You give out a pink slip, and the end of school is to June 18th or 20th, and then people are collecting unemployment, and so and we self-fund unemployment. So there's just a lot of balls in the air.
There are. Other questions? going to go to the capital side of things if there are no further questions at this time. I don't actually have the number. Does anyone have the number of where capital is in the budget book? Yes, sir. For the television, it would be great if you used the mic. Yeah. And if you could identify yourself.
Yeah, sure. My name is Luke Martin. I live at 62 Haywood Street. I also teach at Greenfield High School. And as of next year, I'll also be a parent of a student at the Academy of Early Learning. So I'm seeing this from three sides, three perspectives. And I appreciate your request for questions. I'm going to, as respectfully as possible, ignore that and make sort of a comment that I hope factors into your thinking. And I'll keep it as quick as possible. And what I want to talk about a little bit is attendance, school attendance. I've been a teacher for nearly 10 years, and one of the most shocking studies I've ever seen to this day is about school attendance and the fact that one of the best predictors of graduation rates is school attendance in the earliest grades. It is scary, and it's a better predictor of graduation often than test scores and other things. The Department of Education actually has, if you bear with me for 1 second, released a study recently, and just read a couple of the highlights, that children who are chronically absent in preschool, kindergarten, and first grade are much less likely to read at the grade level by third grade. Students who cannot read at grade level by third grade are 4 times more likely than proficient readers to drop out of school. A study of public school students in Utah found that the incidence of chronic absenteeism, even in a single year between 8th and 12th grade, was associated with a 7-fold increase in the likelihood of dropping out. The same stats by the Department of Education allow you to search by district. Chronic absenteeism, 15 days or more absent from school in Greenfield, is 25.6%. So 1 in 4 students misses more than 2 weeks of school every year. So why at a Ways and Means committee meeting am I saying this? Because when I read the recorder this morning, and having gone to some of the school committee meetings in the past month or so, some of the things that are on the chopping block are busing routes, or possibly making people pay for some busing routes. And what I had seen previously, although I didn't hear it tonight, was early child care or early care, early drop-off for students at elementary schools. So I don't have a question, I apologize for that, but I want to make it clear that these cuts, you can have the best teachers and the most competent administration in this state, but if students are having a harder time even getting to school, and we are going to now make it harder for them to get to school, we can't do our job. I cannot teach students who are not in my classroom. Nobody can. It doesn't matter how competent or good I am. So be aware, I guess is all that I want to say, that some of these cuts are not us trying to do more with less. It is, we won't have an opportunity to teach the students in the first place because they won't be coming to school. So again, apologize that it's not a question, but I think it's something that you need to consider, that we all need to consider in this potential devastating cut. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. Yes, please.
My name's Tara Cloutier. I'm a Greenfield resident.
Push the button so it's yours.
My name's Tara Cloutier. I'm a resident of Greenfield. I have for my entire life. I teach at Greenfield High School. My son graduated from Greenfield. I have twin daughters in 8th grade right now. I'm also the vice president of the GEA, the Teachers Union. My question is, and as I've sat here and listened, and I'm trying my best to understand all of this, I'm a Spanish teacher, and the math is somewhat going over my head sometimes. The thing I don't quite understand is, if we're going to get $1.1 million more from the state, where is I don't understand the discrepancy between the mayor's budget from last year and the mayor's proposed budget this year. If we're getting $1.1 million, why then are we being asked to cut $1.5 million? That's my question.
Thank you. It's a good question. I'll try to answer it with, from the top of my head without having, well, I do have all the figures in front of me, but I'm not going to take the time to find them. I think my summary answer is that, well, first of all, the mayor's budget last year was raised afterwards by the council. So that right there is a change. But essentially, my understanding at this point in the process is there are considerable increases in pension, in health insurance, and there are considerable increases elsewhere in the city. And so I think we're having trouble finding a way to plug in those holes in the pension and the healthcare side of things from elsewhere in the city. And so at this point, that's why, and I guess I'm speaking for the mayor here, this is my understanding of the mayor's budget, is that the money is plugged in there because it has to come from somewhere. And it is a real cost that, does benefit the schools. These are real benefits, the health insurance. I'm sure as a union member, these have been, fought for, and they're well deserved. But the city struggles to balance the budget, and that's what we're here for.
I'd just like to ask you to support the superintendent's budget.
Thank you
so much.
Okay. Other questions directly related to the operating budget? All right. I'm going to I'm actually going to invite the superintendent back up if she's willing to field some questions around the capital requests. I just assume that counselors will have a few. All right, counselors, any questions? Counselor Dolan?
The item rekeying the locks, which got cut in the mayor's budget, am I remembering correctly that was also part of the conversation last year about SROs and school security?
So we did talk about it last year with enhancing school security, both swipe cards and rekeying locks. This is actually an item that through the capital process, I had identified that the mayor could cut. And the reason why was we were applying for funds through Governor Baker's safety initiative. So we have submitted our application for competitive funding to do security around school entrances and exits. So that particular item was cut in this budget, but was submitted through the governor's budget as a grant proposal.
Okay.
And would you remind me, one of the paving requests was addressed partly through, I believe, the generosity of Big Y and volunteer hours. Is that correct?
I believe you're referring to the Newton School project. So Newton School paving was not included in the capital portion. There are two aspects of it, the staff parking lot and the actual main drive into the school, and that was not funded through capital. But the PTO raised funds and Big Y did some additional donations, and that paving was completed. It's for the basketball court. It's essentially a play area for children. So there's been no improvements to the parking area at Newton School. That has been our highest priority capital request for the past 4 years.
Councilor Alice.
The accessibility under Four Corners, has that been dealt with? Is that being done, or is that, because it was asked for by the department, it was approved by the capital committee, and then it was taken out under the mayor. So I'm just curious.
The mayor was able to identify ADA and I believe block grant funds so that that work could continue. Those are old requests. I think they were agreed to in 2014, and we recently identified that there was some work outstanding on that, and so that work was being completed through funds that the mayor identified. And through the capital process, we were able to prioritize if there were available funds somewhere else, and that was, I think, well used through another source.
Very good. Councilor Dolan?
So it sounds like you've found ways to do several of these things. Would the damaged fencing, cameras, and exterior and interior doors also fall under the request at the state level for safety?
We included some of the additional cameras only for security, so sort of facing exterior doors or in areas that we could otherwise enhance building security with our grant proposal. No way to know if that will come through. Yeah. So we are, but this is an example of where we are aware and identifying any way we can to chase down additional grant dollars. And in the last couple of months, we received a $105,000 grant for mental health from the governor. We're really looking actively. We have a grants manager that looks very actively for these so that when available, capital funds like that can go to other departments. And that's part of how we approach being part of this community and trying to make those funds available elsewhere. There are other areas in our capital requests where, we really did feel that there were critical concerns and there wasn't anywhere else to approach them. So we brought those through capital.
I have a question about the technology request, even though it didn't make it through the capital process. Let's see, my question is, just with computers in general, and I would assume that most of this request is computers, is that correct, or laptops, or Chromebooks?
Some of it is more the infrastructure, so the actual servers, sort of the backbone of our digital equipment for security for the district. Others are entire classroom computer labs. So the practice prior to my arrival was that entire classroom labs would come through. We might fund a new high school computer lab, for example, and take old computers at the high school and put them in the elementary schools. Practice has been done for a long time, so that we're taking something that's slower and putting it into an elementary grade. Yeah. But over time, we have computers that are, 15, 20 years old, and they do reach the end of their useful life. If any of you have a computer that old at home, give me a call. We'll talk.
Yeah. Are we in danger of getting to a point where just, everything has to be replaced? I would assume that there's a better way to do it is to, gradually replace one classroom at a time. Are we getting to a point where that could, obviously at some point you're going to have to deal with this, right?
So the funding through Massachusetts for technology and other things, the E-rate recommends a 3-year replacement cycle so that you are replacing a third of your district technology every year. A number of years ago, late school committee member Jeff Kamenitz calculated the replacement cycle. His background was in IT, and he calculated the replacement cycle of technology in our district, and it was 17 years. That was when technology was coming through capital. So I fear now it's on the order of 20. We have smart boards. We have an increasing dependence on technology. And when you talk about the competitive environment that we're in, giving students the opportunity to use the technology that they will use in college and use in their careers is an important part of the training that we do provide. When you think about what they offer at the tech school, they offer students the opportunity to learn in school the skills that will help them to succeed in their careers. We don't do that the same way, but we do that by providing students the tools they need to succeed. Technology is a critical part of it. I'm not arguing that it needs to come through capital, but I am arguing that we need to be able to provide that. When teachers have the most outdated technology in the district, which is what they have, and they can't provide the best resources, tools, and they're spending valuable time, and not being as efficient as they could be.
Thank you. Any other questions around capital from counselors? Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Harper.
Thank you.
Obviously, this is just the beginning of the school side of things. I'm gonna let everyone know that our next meeting of Ways and Means is this Tuesday, April 30th, 6 p.m. here. We'll be talking then about DPW and GSAT. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Adjourned at 7:59.
All of our productions at GCTV are sponsored in part by Bay State Health, providing the care you and your family need when you need it close to home. Visit them online at baystatehealth.org. Greenfield Savings Bank. Visit them at 400 Main Street in Greenfield. Call them at 774-3191 or go online to greenfieldsavings.com. Greenfield Community College, providing access and excellence in higher education in the Pioneer Valley. Visit them at gcc.mass.edu. The Hammond Family. The Hammond family are longtime supporters of Greenfield Community Television. New Fortune Chinese Restaurant on the Mohawk Trail in Greenfield. Visit them online at newfortunema.com. Call them at 772-0838 and check them out on Facebook. Real Cleaning Services, cleaning Hampshire and Franklin County since 1972. We don't cut corners, we clean them. Check them out online at realclean.com. Call them at 413-422-1143. People's United Bank, located at 45 Federal Street in Greenfield. You can call them at 774-3713 or visit them online at peoples.com. The Solar Store of Greenfield, replacing fossil fuels and nuclear power one home at a time. Visit them at 23 Fisk Ave. Call them at 413-772-3122 or visit them online at solarstoreofgreenfield.com. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting all of GCTV's productions.
1, 2.
You're